Good morning, and I should say that for the United States. Good afternoon in the UK, and good evening in India. Welcome, everyone, to this virtual celebration of the Deep Griha Society. I'm Randall Rocke, and I will be your host for this gathering. I am the network and interneting, you might say, manager for Deep Griha USA. So I will be your host today, and this will be kind of our control center for everything that happens today. So welcome all. I will say that before we start, I will do some housekeeping. Number one, for some of you, you may be experiencing in Deep Griha for the first time or learning about it for the first time. The founders of Deep Griha, Bhaskar, I would say the Reverend Bhaskar Onawale, and his wife, Dr. Neela Onawale, are gone now. They passed away a few years ago, first Bhaskar and then Neela. Today, Ashlesha Onawale, the director of Deep Griha in Pune, India, who is their daughter, has been running the Deep Griha programs very well, and she is one of our guests today. Also joining us is the chair of the Friends of Deep Griha UK, Susannah Hodge, and I will represent Deep Griha USA. One other thing before we start our program, for those of you that have never used the Q&A system of a Zoom webinar, you can hover your mouse over a portion of usually the bottom of your browser, and you will see the Q&A icon. If you want to send in a question, and we'll be dealing with those later in the program, just hover over that, click it, and then you can type in and send a question in. And when Ashlesha's presentation is finished later today, we will go into question and answer mode and try to answer as many questions as possible. So be aware of where that is. I've been informed by some of those in our board that use iPads and other devices that Q&A icon might be in a different spot. For most PCs, it's near the bottom, but if you don't see it on your iPad, you might check near the top. So without further ado, I am now going to take us to our opening for this program, which will be Kriska, and Sally will be introducing the background of how Deep Griha came to be.
Greetings from Columbus, Ohio. On a warm summer day in 1972, my husband and I drove to the local airport to welcome Dr. Neela and the Reverend Bhaskar Onawale and their two daughters to Columbus, where they were going to live for a year. At the time, I thought I was doing a good deed, but what I was really doing was creating a new friendship with the Onawale family that has lasted almost 50 years. This friendship has been a great blessing and a source of continued inspiration for my life. During their year in Columbus, we shared many meals and laughter, and Bhaskar shared his deep faith and wider worldview with two congregations, and Neela joined a women's group. And later, when they lived in Princeton, New Jersey, she took a course in women's health. One evening, towards the end of their time in the United States, they were sitting around our dining room table, and they announced that they had decided that when they went back to Pune, they were going to start a small medical clinic in their apartment. There were a number of people, actually huge numbers of people that came in from the rural areas around Pune for education and work, but there were no social service or health services for them when they came. So they decided, and it shocked and awed me that they would take on this huge job all by themselves. But 2 years later, in a small converted storeroom, Deep Griha was born. A trickle of patients soon turned into a deluge. And it was a great joy to watch their dream grow. They created innovative systems and effective solutions to real-life challenges to the people and for the people who lived in Pune. After Bhaskar and Neela returned to India, we communicated by aerogram, which is a very thin sheet of paper that took weeks to get from one place to another. Today, with the advances of technology, we gather from distant locations with a click of the button to celebrate this special organization that has touched so many lives, both in Pune and around the world. We also celebrate the legacy that was Bhaskar and Neela's dream. And we celebrate the 4 decades of hard work that made this dream come true. But we especially celebrate Ashlesha and her amazing team that has worked so hard and managed the multiple challenges of this pandemic year. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce to you the Executive Director of Deep Griha, Ashlesha Onawale.
Thank you for joining us as we celebrate Deep Griha today. It's been almost 46 years since Deep Griha first opened its doors as a single-room clinic in Reverend Bhaskar Onawale and Dr. Neela Onawale's home. A couple who decided that they wanted to give back to society, who wanted to work with families, low-income families, to create opportunity for them, to provide access to certain amenities for them. And they started off with a medical clinic, I guess because of Dr. Neela Onawale. The clinic opened doors for her into the community. Through the clinic and through her experience there, she learned that malnourishment was a big cause of, was the underlying cause of a lot of the health issues. That led for them to open up a nutrition center and so lay the foundation for how Deep Griha grew over the next 40 odd years. Basically responding to the needs of the community, whether it was introduction of the nutrition program through the clinic, whether it's the childcare program to ensure that the under 5-year-olds are provided with the nutrition that they need, whether it was creating access for school-going children to continue their education even if they've lost a single or both their parents. All the programs at Deep Griha have been as a result of a felt need of the communities. Today we stand at 3 urban centers and 2 rural centers. You will hear from some of these participants, children who've been part of the sponsorship program. I believe a lot of you would be associated with the Aadhar Kendra sponsorship program. You will hear from children there. You will also hear from ex-volunteers and people who've been part of Deep Griha's global family. In essence, Deep Griha is based on relationships, whether it's relationships with the community, whether it's relationships with volunteers, or even our donors and funders out there. We're grateful for each and every one of these relationships. Today, we get to go into the community and hear about parents who used to be part of the creche program. Today, they're bringing their children for different activities. Grandmothers who were part of programs and now are bringing their grandchildren in for programs or activities. It helps us in our endeavor to make sure that we are always changing according to the needs of the community, that we're evolving with them, and that has definitely strengthened that relationship. Apart from the community, we have worked with volunteers. We've had volunteers who came out since the early 80s, late 70s maybe, young people who came out because they wanted to change the world, who went back completely changed because of their experience at Deep Griha, who came back to talk about how Deep Griha and their time at Deep Griha had changed them. People who became ambassadors for Deep Griha when they went back, ambassadors who spread the word of Deep Griha and work that we do far and wide, leading to the global community that we are today. Some of them became donors, some of them led to more donors, friends and families of volunteers became our donors and supporters. Also people who had helped Neela and Bhaskar way back in the early 70s are also part of that group and that family, an essential part of it. All these relationships together make Deep Griha the global family that it is today, and we're grateful for it.
Hello, I'm Cathy Slemp, a Deep Griha USA board member from West Virginia, a public health physician, and a former volunteer with Deep Griha in Pune. First, my thanks to both Sally and Ashlesha. They have shared much of the history and mission of Deep Griha Society with passion and grace, and they spoke to the importance of partnership. I'd like to speak to you a bit more about Deep Griha USA. We see again and again that when exposed to Deep Griha firsthand, people are drawn to partner with and support it. DGUSA began in spirit decades ago as a church mission board project. By the mid-2000s, it had become its own standalone 501c3. Our purpose is to bridge people to the work of Deep Griha and to support that work in meaningful and relevant ways. The term Deep Griha translates to a house offering a lamp. Deepa is an act of worship, of wisdom, and it recognizes the sacred around and within us. We speak to this very practically in our logo, lighting paths and building futures. How have we partnered with Deep Griha to do that? In the mid-2000s, we heard the dream for a rural academy and agricultural training center, and we were one of the first to help raise capital to bring that dream to reality. On a smaller scale, we heard the need for and sponsored a van to shuttle people and supplies among program locales. Much work has been done to link people to the Aadhar Kendra child sponsorship program, something you'll hear more about from another board member momentarily. And now, as technology and energy becomes critical globally, we anticipate raising funds for solar panels to decrease the cost of diesel at the school and to model environmental sustainability. I was first exposed to Deep Griha over 35 years ago as one of the organization's first international volunteers. I went ready to serve and to give. I came home inspired, humbled, befriended, and gifted with a seed that I knew would somehow grow. When I think about Deep Griha, I think about challenge, growth, and change, changing the life course of program participants, volunteers, and staff, changing assumptions about social hierarchies, HIV status, or gender, about changing communities, the availability of services, education level, opportunities, and most importantly, people's ability to shape and change their own and their family's future. I have never served on a board where the members are both so passionately committed or remarkably capable. With decades of experience, DGUSA is not new to this work. Beyond financial support, we have helped sponsor volunteers, served as a sounding board for strategic planning, and will soon be working again to coordinate a trip to Pune when the time is right, knowing that it's when people see the work firsthand that hearts change and people grow. COVID, interestingly, has allowed DGUSA to not only reach across state borders more smoothly, but now globally. We've long known about Friends of Deep Griha UK, but are now excitingly meeting, collaborating, and sharing ideas across the pond. In fact, it's my distinct pleasure, on behalf of the DGUSA board, to introduce you now to my newest Deep Griha friend, Susannah Hodge, Chair of the Friends of Deep Griha UK. Thank you.
Thank you, Cathy, for such a warm welcome and such interesting insight into Deep Griha USA. Much of what you have spoken about certainly resonates with us here, and it has also been great to be able to connect with those of you who are part of Deep Griha USA over the last few months. We hope that one day we'll perhaps be able to meet you in person, and maybe we can make that happen in India. My name is Susannah, and I'm Chair of Friends of Deep Griha UK. This is a role I've done for the last 7 years, although Friends of Deep Griha UK has been around for longer, since being set up in 2004. There are also many who are involved with us whose relationship with Deep Griha goes back even further. As an example, in 1986, the first youth exchange between the Liverpool Methodist District and Pune took place. This involved youth from the UK visiting Deep Griha and Pune, and in exchange, youth from Pune being hosted by families in the UK. The first exchange included 8 young people with 2 leaders, and several other exchanges then followed. Many of the relationships built during these exchanges still endure today, and some of those involved are now trustees, including Wendy, who led the first trip to Pune, as well as Barbara and David, and there are many others who are still keen supporters. Another figure in the development of Friends of Deep Griha UK is Mary Toll. She first visited Deep Griha in 1996 while she was staying at Sangam. And for those of you who don't know, Sangam is a Girl Guiding or Girl Scouts World Centre that's also in Pune. On this particular trip, her and her husband had been running activities at the Family Welfare Centre and noticed one of the boys had a problem with one of his eyes. Mary spoke to Neela about what support they might be able to offer this young boy. And in the same conversation, she also spoke to Neela about the work she'd previously done with Vision Aid overseas. It was from this one conversation that Mary and her husband started to organise eye clinics in Pune and the surrounding areas. Mary and her husband and other volunteers returned to India many times and ran eye clinics on some 14 different trips. They also fundraised all the costs they needed to cover the expenses of doing this. This involvement led to the creation of the Deep Griha Eye Clinic in Taliwada Road, and later in 2000, the development of the Deep Griha Mobile Eye Clinic. These eye camps have continued with other groups returning to Pune as recently as 2019. And I think had it not been for the global pandemic, we would have had a group visiting last year as well, and would have been this year. As Deep Griha began to build relationships with many of those in the UK through various different ways, Deep Griha suggested that perhaps those in the UK could look to create a support group. It was on the 21st of May 2004 that some of these supporters met and agreed to form a group and apply for charitable status, where Mary Toll was elected chair. Some of the aims of Friends of Deep Griha UK agreed at that meeting are the same today: to raise awareness of Deep Griha's issues and work, and to raise funds to finance and support Deep Griha's projects. Some of us have more recent involvement in Deep Griha. I myself first visited in 2005, whilst I was also staying at Sangam. I then returned in 2011 to volunteer with Deep Griha for 6 months. Cathy, another of our trustees, first visited Deep Griha in 2006 and later returned in 2009 to also volunteer for longer. Much of what both Cathy and I do now has been shaped by our time at Deep Griha, and we are delighted to be able to continue supporting them. Friends of Deep Griha is a very small organisation with 6 trustees and tens of members, although we've achieved a lot since our inception. We facilitate a number of sponsors for the Aadhar Kendra child sponsorship programme. We host fundraisers, and we keep those in the UK with a connection to Deep Griha up to date with what has been happening. We've also had people doing sponsored walks. Some supporters have been involved in the development of the Deep Griha Academy, and more recently we raised just over £2,000 to provide a solar-powered water pump and filter for the City of Child. And I was actually delighted to be able to go and see the water pump and filter when I was in India last February. Some of our other members also go on regular trips to Pune, including Jill and Peter, who have taken groups of Girl Guides or Girl Scouts, and also they've taken groups of adults with them, and they've done things, for example, to run workshops with women who are part of the Income Generation programme to teach them new skills. If anyone is joining this call from the UK or Europe and you're not currently involved with what you do, with what we do, but you'd like to get involved, please do get in touch, and there will be details sent out after this webinar. Next, I'm delighted to say we're going to go on a bit of a virtual tour to India and see some recent videos and images from the City of Child and the Deep Griha Academy.
Hello, I'm Bharat Baste, a Deep Griha USA board member. I'm here today with my wife Bhakti and our children Reva and Rohan. We live in Upper Arlington, Ohio, and have been honored to be a part of Deep Griha USA for the past 5 years. First and foremost, thank you to Sally, Ashlesha, Cathy, and Susannah for introducing us to the various aspects and positive impact that Deep Griha as an organization has made on so many lives. Bhakti and I are both architects and have been very fortunate in running a successful business over the past 10 years. And I've always wanted to give back to the community, both here in the US and in our home country of India, where we both grew up. Our close friend Pawan Peter, who currently serves as the chairperson of the board of trustees for Deep Griha, introduced us to the organization. It was instantly a perfect avenue for us to be involved in something bigger than our day-to-day lives and careers. We were particularly moved by the immense impact a child sponsorship makes in the future of children and families that are not as fortunate as ours, and helps cement a better future for the recipients.
As Bharat mentioned earlier, we own a company together and have always wanted to support a social cause as part of our business. We truly believe success has to be shared and are very encouraged by the various new companies world over that are adopting social causes as part of company culture and moving away from a traditionally inward-looking, bottom-line driven culture of the past. We pledged that we would support one child sponsorship per team member of our organization, ensuring that as we grow as a business, we extend our support to the community proportionately. Our family had an opportunity to visit Aadhar Kendra in Pune a couple of years ago. During our visit to Deep Griha, we got a first-hand glimpse of the great work and amazing service that Ashlesha and her team provide to the local community. We also immensely enjoyed meeting some of the children that the child sponsorship program supports. Our children will elaborate on the various programs you can participate in. Reva?
Sponsor a child's basic needs. A child's basic needs can be met for a whole year for just $190, about 50 cents a day. For this amount, a sponsored child receives 1 balanced, nutrition-rich meal a day, clothes and shoes, educational materials including books, stationery, school bags, and uniform, medical care including regular checkups and treatment when needed, family assistance for unexpected events such as family illness or damage to the home, extracurricular activities and group outings such as plays, picnics, and educational trips, recreational and fun events such as birthday parties and game days.
Sponsor a child's education for just $95. You can support a child's education for a year. With this educational sponsorship, you will ensure that a child receives a high-quality English medium education, which is vital to providing the children with the best possible start in life. You can also choose to combine the two programs for $285 per year to maximize the potential of each child.
Deep Griha encourages an interactive relationship between sponsor and child. Sponsors receive an annual academic progress report and update on the child's development and well-being. In addition, sponsors and children exchange letters and can even meet in person. We request you to maintain your sponsorship for a minimum of 5 years. By making an ongoing commitment, you help to ensure the security and continuity of support for a child in need. Coming up, we would like to bring you some glimpses of the Aadhar Kendra program in the following segment. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Deepak Sonawane. I am 21 years old and I am pursuing my final year of mechanical engineering from Sihagad Academy of Engineering, Pune. When I was in 9th class, I have lost my father and that was big shock to our family. Suddenly, all the burden of responsibilities came upon my mother. I gave her the power to fight and to stay strong. After that, I scored 88% in my 10th standard and I got admission in Ferguson College for science stream. At same time, Deep Griha Society helped me a lot to pay my college fees and they have improved my confidence also. Deep Griha's team guided me and now helping me to achieving my goals. I continued my technical learning with online platforms, but as all the income sources were closed because of this lockdown, this is very challenging situation for us. But here also, Deep Griha providing us grocery and reducing our stress by taking online awareness sessions. I just want to say thank you, Deep Griha.
And now, before we continue with the next segment of our program, I'll just give a quick introduction to what's coming next. I went with our first documentary crew to India just before the turn of the century to do the first production for television of what was happening there. And it changed my life. So I will share some moments from that. Following my presentation, we will hear from Ashlesha Onawale, and she will bring us up to date on everything that has been happening in the past year. We finally touched down in India and made our way into Pune for the first time in January of 1999. We had initially attempted to pack up our broadcast television equipment and travel to Pune in 1987, but the political turmoil taking place in India at the time had denied us access. We began in the city slums, first into Onawale, where the Family Welfare Center is located, then into Remembrances, and finally into the Bibbawadi. Day after day, as we spent many hours capturing footage of the extensive work of Deep Griha, we began to realize there was something else going on here. We were changing. As the days went by, we began to appreciate that the people of Pune's slums and the rural areas that Deep Griha also impacted carried, in many cases, an open and welcoming spirit, something that we had not been expecting. During the process of documentary production, we also recorded a number of interviews, which included adolescents, young mothers, teachers, and some staff members. All of these were inspiring. But one interview brought home the impact of Deep Griha and the shared humanity of all of us who inhabit this world to me more than any other. Deep in the Bibbawadi slum, surrounded by refuse and compressed humanity, we began an interview with a young mother. She wore a striking yellow and pink sari which glowed in the sun, and her hair was neatly tied back with ribbons. She had been abandoned by her husband and was left to make a way in this world for herself and her young son. As she shared extensively about the ways in which Deep Griha had impacted their lives, she would sob from time to time and then shoulder on. During a break in the shooting, I asked the interviewer to share some of her story with me, as we wouldn't be working with the translators till late in the evening. She told me that the woman had learned, through Deep Griha, to read and write, as she wanted to help her son with his homework. This eventually carried into training that led to a job in a local bag-making factory, where she was better able to provide for their well-being. Deep Griha had changed their lives significantly, maybe even saved them. As I thought over these things, I suddenly found myself leaning against a nearby corrugated building for support. It had become difficult to stand for some reason, and then I began to cry uncontrollably. At first, I couldn't figure out why this was happening to me. Then I realized that I had made a core discovery. These people were no different than me. They had the same love of family and the desire to give them a good home and a hope-filled future as my parents and my family. They were valued children of the Creator. Their lot in life was an accident of birth and environment. Their fortitude and work ethic were commendable and inspiring.
मला मी हे सांगेल की तुम्ही पण शिका. असं वय शिक्षणाला काय वय नसतं. मी नंतर प्रत्यक्ष शिकल्यानंतरच मला असं समजलं. पहिलं घराची परिस्थितीच अशी होती की शाळेत नाही जाऊ शकले ना. मग नंतर आता शिकले. आता मला खूप आनंद होतो.
म्हणजे तुझ्या अनुभवावरून तू तुझ्या जे मुलं आहेत स्वतःची तर त्यांनाही जास्त शिकवायचं असं ठरवलंय.
मी आता असं ठरवलंय, माझा एकच मुलगा आहे, मी त्याला खूप शिकवल, त्याला मोठं करेल असं माझी इच्छा आहे.
We are called in our beliefs to care for the downtrodden and less fortunate. However, what was brought to my attention dramatically that day is that the less fortunate are not less. We will now proceed to Neela's daughter, Ashlesha, as she presents all the things that have been happening in the past year. Before we proceed, just a reminder, please send in your questions with the Q&A button, and we'd be happy to respond to them. She is here with us today and will answer any questions that you don't feel were covered in her presentation. Now let's go to Ashlesha.
I want to thank everyone who has shared about not just their associations, but also the history of how Deep Griha came to be. The journey from a one-room clinic to an organization with 3 urban centers and 2 rural ones. We have heard from partners, supporters, and participants, the Deep Griha family in essence. I will now speak particularly about the last 12 months. Deep Griha, as you know, works with low-income communities, with small homes built very close to each other. You may have seen these either on a visit or in one of the videos, or maybe in the one coming after. Just the kind of environment that a highly infectious virus needs to thrive, and it did. A majority of the community members are daily wage workers, housemaids, and the lockdown directly affected income and, in effect, access to food for all the families. Families where savings are a bit of a luxury. All the essential stores, including the government ones, with subsidized rates, were only operational for a few hours a day, leading to crowds of people thronging to get enough food for their families in that short time. Families that usually bought essentials daily, with no option of buying stock for a week or a month, and didn't have anything ready to carry them through the lockdown. The living conditions ensured that the virus spread very quickly in Tadiwala Road, Ramtekdi, and Bibewadi. All these areas were containment zones, barricaded so that families couldn't visit their neighbors or even speak to each other. The government had to employ very strict measures to bring the numbers from about 60 to 70 new cases a day in the Tadiwala Road community down to 5 to 6 a day. The police officer I spoke with talked about how it was difficult for them as well, imposing these rules, recognizing what people were already dealing with and suffering with, but there was no real option. A lot of Deep Griha staff was unable to travel to work because of the restrictions. We knew the communities needed our support and our presence more than ever. Deep Griha's field workers who live in the community came through beautifully. One of Deep Griha's strengths is that over 50% of the staff come from the communities that we work with. The staff was approached by community members, either creche parents or women from the different programs, seeking help because of the long-standing relationship. And we were remotely able to coordinate with vendors for parcels of essentials to be packed and delivered to our centers. The staff worked very hard to ensure distribution of essentials to families in need within the communities. Deep Griha was able to provide groceries and support over 1,500 families at the right time. This was also possible because of local and international support. The Deep Griha's partners around the world, Deep Griha USA and Friends of Deep Griha UK particularly, made sure that they continued their support through these very trying times. Apart from the regular distribution of essentials, the IGP or Income Generation Program was able to mobilize women from the community with sewing skills to make face masks. These masks were distributed widely within the community, outside the community, um, also giving the women an opportunity to generate a small income to sustain themselves. A lot of the programs run by Deep Griha adapted true to itself and moved on to the online platform in April 2020 itself, much to the credit of the teams. The sponsorship program replaced home visits with regular phone calls to ensure the children and their families were all right, to see if they needed anything, to see if they needed any emergency support. Counseling sessions were conducted online as well. As I'm sure everyone knows, mental health took a beating, and counseling sessions continue to be online. Tech Mahindra's Vocational Skills Center, that we run along with Tech Mahindra Foundation, were able to move on to online classes as well, as did Deep Griha Academy. A considerable feat when you think what the teachers and the students had access to in the villages, whether in regard to devices, network and connectivity, not to mention trainings that they had to undergo to make it all happen. Deep Griha sadly saw 3 programs shut down last year. The childcare program, if you've ever visited any of the centers, the heart of Deep Griha, had to shut down because of high risk and high cost. Activities under the Women's Empowerment Program ended as well. The adult literacy classes were unable to move to the online platform. Awareness sessions in the community needed to stop in the format that we had used for years. The dental and eye clinics were discontinued as well, that were part of the medical program. We continue to distribute DOTS medication for tuberculosis patients. Disha, that used to conduct awareness sessions at schools, needed to stop because schools were shut. This year, Disha has focused on supporting families living with HIV through regularly organized health checkup camps, as well as grocery distribution. Difficult decisions, tough choices, but necessary ones. On the other hand, at school, we were approached by a local government doctor to use the Deep Griha Academy building as a COVID center. The government needed to set up COVID centers outside the city to take the pressure off city hospitals, which were already flowing with patients needing admission and care. The center ran at school for a few months. The building was handed back to us only last month as we began preparations to reopen school. We don't have a set date yet. Pune currently is experiencing a second wave and has a record number of new COVID patients every day as I speak. Vaccines are available at all the hospitals, but it will be a long while before a majority of the population is covered. Last June, we were able to use the cultural center as a makeshift office to work out of, as the Tadiwala Road office was not always easy to access due to the restrictions. Through this last year, we've also built on new partnerships with new organizations to ensure continued support to the community. Deep Griha has partnered with SCHOOL, Society of Community Health Oriented Operational Links, to work towards aging with dignity for over 60-year-olds, citizens in need of extra support in the Tadiwala Road and Ramtekdi communities. We have also collaborated with other organizations to bring health camps and awareness sessions to the community, online awareness sessions. The challenges have backed us into a corner. They have forced us to reinvent interventions, find solutions that we hadn't considered before. This year, with the reduced interventions, the changing nature of the activities, all of this created space for Deep Griha to pause, regroup, and work towards a plan to come out on the other side of the pandemic, stronger and wiser. The use of technology has also reduced the gap between resources and the end user. Distance is no longer the barrier it used to be if we want to achieve something, of course, with adequate technology, support of technology. We are aware that technology can't solve all the problems, but it has been something of a blessing through these very unusual days. Today is a great example of a positive side effect of the pandemic, where we, Deep Griha's extended family, can come together over 3 continents at this virtual event. Today at Deep Griha, we are working on a roadmap that will carry us through not only these tough times, but into the future. Foundations are being laid to continue conversations with the community, to better understand their needs today, their vision for the future, and to find our place, our role as Deep Griha to support the community's vision. We are working on collecting as much information as we can to support the decisions that will have to be made in the very near future as we begin the journey towards the next 40 years for Deep Griha. The support of our partners, Deep Griha USA and Friends of Deep Griha UK, have been the primary source of strength through this time. Beyond these two entities, we have valued the support of all our partners, both local and international, individual and corporate, the CSR, partners and supporters who have believed in Deep Griha and stood by us through these trying times. As Deep Griha works on a granular plan to take us forward, we ask that you stay with us, whether it is through funds, every little bit counts, through the sharing of your expertise and time by volunteering, or through spreading the word of Deep Griha and the work that we do. It's been hard trying to encapsulate 12 months that felt like 12 years into 10 minutes. And I'm pretty sure I've forgotten things. Example, City of Child, that continue to look after children through the lockdown. We also have a computer center there, which is fabulous. Please feel free to ask questions. I'm happy to answer them for anything that you want to know and anything that I might have missed. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Ashlesha. I'm going to switch over to everyone. I think you'll be able to see our panelists here. There we go. Joining me right now live, Ashlesha Onawale from Pune and Susannah, thank you. Joining also from the UK. And while we've been presenting all of these videos and sharing the story of Deep Griha, questions have been coming in. So I'm going to open these up to see what the questions are, and we'll take them from the top. And Ashlesha, get ready. You certainly have some to start with here. Can you give me a quick test here? Say hello.
Hi.
Okay.
It's good to be here.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that everything was working fine there. Our first question comes from Ken. What volunteer programs are in the greatest need at this time? What volunteer programs, I guess, greatest needs? Okay.
So volunteering this year in person is going to be a little more difficult with logistics and rules that every country has. And for us to ensure that they stay safe, and as do our participants. I think we would love to encourage more remote volunteering. And one of the things we talked about was digital upgrade that the staff required and learning more about technology. This is something that can be done remotely, and we would love for people who have expertise to come forward and help us and guide the team as we get with it.
But we've got a question here that I think I need to answer, and then I'll pick up Ashlesha. This is from Elizabeth. How do we obtain a link to send this webinar to our friends and family? Elizabeth, in a couple of days, I will send a link out to everyone who's, that joined this webinar with a recording. And we're going to post a recording of this entire event on the Deep Griha USA YouTube channel, and you'll have a link. So if you are part of this, and you are, Elizabeth, you will get this link. So give me a couple of days. I will kind of trim it up, and then I will post it on our YouTube channel. And now we have a question from Barb. How has the vaccine program been going, and what vaccines are being used?
So the vaccine program has just in April opened up to everyone over the age of 45. So when they first started, it was for 60 years and above, and anyone with underlying health issues could go in as well. But now it's open to everyone 45 years and onwards. I think about 9 million vaccines have been given out in Maharashtra. which is not a big number so far, but it's still going on. I mean, people are still going to hospitals, private and government, for the vaccine. And the two available are the AstraZeneca Oxford one and locally developed, India developed one called Bharat. So both those are available. I think more of the AstraZeneca and fewer of the Indian developed one.
We have a question from Pavan. Oh, I'm sorry, did I?
No, I was just going to say, Randy, on the back of that, there's another question that's kind of asked about, are people wary of getting the vaccine, and kind of, I guess, what impact that might be having on the rollout?
I think it's both. There are people who are wary, but there are people who are rushing to get the vaccine as well. I mean, we keep getting updates about vaccine centers, vaccination centers being too busy and far too many people going in. So there's a bit of both. I think there's a little bit of wariness, but there are a lot of people who just want to get out there and know that they're going to be okay moving forward.
Thank you.
And I think
go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, go on. We also might have a little bit of a shortage right now, so that's a good sign in the sense of people are going forward to get the vaccination. So.
All right, thank you. I have a question from Pavan. Could you speak a little more about the Aadhar Kendra sponsorship program and how your staff monitors and assists children and their families through the years in the program, and how are sponsors kept involved in the child's program?
So the Aadhar Kendra, the sponsorship program, I think most of you are aware of this particular program and association through it. But if you're not, so the program was started off for children or young people who came from single parent homes or had been orphaned. Very often the extended family was available to support, but because of the strained financial conditions, they weren't able to give the child what was necessary. So the sponsorship program steps in and sort of provides everything that the child would need to continue with an education, continue having access to an education. The children are referred to us, or the field workers find out by going out into the community who is eligible even. As far as there's a field worker is assigned a number of children that she sort of does home visits with, stays in touch with. We have counselors who are also look after the children when it comes to their emotional needs, other questions they might have, awareness sessions that need to be organized for them come through the counselor. The field workers stay in touch with family and also keep in touch with school to make sure to follow up on how the child is doing at school. We support the children through their education until they get to stand on their own 2 feet, which could mean a job. Sometimes it means getting married and moving on. I think there were 2 or 3 parts to that question. I don't know if I've answered all of them.
Okay. Yes, that was pretty involved.
There, I think reports go out 2 or 3 times a year to let the sponsor know and keep them updated about how the child is doing, not just at school, but also generally how the child is doing with health and how the family is doing. So there are 2 updates that go out to, and we encourage individual conversation as well through letters. And I think, like Bharat mentioned, if you happen to be in Pune, you can also visit with the child.
Okay, moving to the next one here from Ken. Will online classes continue for youth and adults? And are you going to continue them after the pandemic has passed?
I think so, because I think some online classes really reduce the distance between the resource that we want and the people that we want having access to that resource. So even if we go back to regular school, I think online classes will continue to be a big part of learning for all age groups.
Question
also
from
gives us bigger reach. Sorry.
Oh, I'm probably get it all in. A question from Ali. How has City of Child been impacted over the past year? I think we covered some of this, but anything you want to fill in there?
So after the lockdown was announced last year, quite a few of the families came and picked up their children to have them at home with them. But I think about 15 children continued to stay at City of Child, and they stayed with us throughout and were able to visit home only last Diwali, which was almost a year after. So I think City of Child continued to almost work as if normal, as usual, except with a smaller group of children. And we had to find a lot of different online activities to keep them engaged. And also a little bit of a challenge was they wanted to go back home, and we had to convince them that they were actually far more safe at the City of Child. So City of Child, in that sense, was not really impacted. And the fact that the computer classes started around the same time helped. So the children could attend their online classes.
The reason I was smiling here is this is kind of a loaded question, and it's from Ali. Who was your favorite volunteer ever?
It had to be Alistair McLennan.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah. All right, I had to put that in there. I'm trying to move to make sure that we cover all of these questions here. Elizabeth asked, has Deep Griha USA figured out how to have stock donations wired? I'll speak to that real quickly. Yes, we have figured it out. We have to work it out with a bank, and we're setting up the program. Once it's in place, we won't have any issues with stock being, donated or things. But we had to apply for this, and so it caused us some difficulty in the last few months. Elizabeth, if you want to send me a note, I can connect you with our treasurer because he's been working hard on that. Okay, let's go on with questions for Ashlesha. From Elizabeth, what is the biggest financial need for Deep Griha right now?
So I think digital access is something that we've really felt the need for over the last year. All our centers don't have the kind of internet access that we would ideally like to have, so that the staff can do what they need to do remotely. We also, again, this is coming back from what we learned from the pandemic, and moving forward, we do want to use a lot of technology in being able to reach more people, having a wider reach than we have so far. So I think digital upgradation and digital access are two of the things that need to be our focus this year. Apart from that, we're also working, and for example, Aadhar Kendra is a great place to start, trying to strengthen digital access, internet access for the children, what they're able to do with it, as well as at our end, if an app or something can be developed that will help us reach out to more children because the pandemic is going to have affected a lot of families and incomes, and a lot of children are going to have trouble with access to education. And we would love to use this time to sort of reach out to far more children and change who we help and alter the criteria that we have.
I would interject at this time that some of you know that on the Deep Griha USA website, we have a donation and sponsorship page. Also, there is a method for those in the UK and Europe to work through the Friends of Deep Griha UK. And I think that is through their Facebook page. Susannah might be able to give us more information on that. I would point out that those of you who are familiar with giving or donating on our site, during the pandemic, we have changed the options. You used to be able to go through a list of all the areas that you could give to, women's development, et cetera. Because of the holding or stoppage of a lot of these programs, we have taken that list down to two main areas, and that is area of greatest need and sponsorship. And we trust that Ashlesha and our staff, when they get a donation for area of greatest need, will say, okay, this is where it needs to go today. And that's why it's kind of simplistic right now. There's also a little section there for Deep Griha USA's administration that has just to do with keeping our website stuff going. Don't get confused by that, okay? But those are the two main areas, and then they're able to apply where it needs to go. We have a question for Susannah. So Susannah, you might want to turn your mic on. What are some of Deep Griha UK's plans for activities and fundraising going forward? How can people in the UK and Europe get involved?
Which is a very good question. At the moment, I think probably like Deep Griha USA, we've been mainly fundraising for kind of unrestricted money, as we call it. So for Deep Griha to use it however they see fit at the moment in relation to the kind of pandemic response. We had a fundraiser next year. We were obviously hoping, I think, as with a lot of people, that actually the pandemic might not be going on for quite this long. We might be able to kind of set up a fundraising campaign for something specific. I think a lot of that will still be pandemic related, but I think there's definitely conversations I think us and Deep Griha USA will have with Ashlesha, particularly, you know, over the digital area Ashlesha just talked about, and how we can best support them. But I think, like Randy said, there's always a need for us to be able to cover costs like Deep Griha's administration costs and those sorts of things. But normally what people do, and what Randy alluded to, we have two ways people can donate: via PayPal. We have a PayPal giving site, or we have a fundraising page as well. But also people can get in touch with us, drop us a note on our email address, and we can speak to them. If there's specific things they would like to donate to, we can do that. But I think at the moment, because of the pandemic is forever changing, and perhaps Ashlesha can, I know since she recorded those videos, I know the picture in India has changed, even in the last 2 weeks. So perhaps maybe Ashlesha can just give us a bit of information about that. But I think at the moment the best use is for people to donate to us kind of unrestricted funds, and then we can have conversations with Ashlesha about how they can best use that money, rather than it being for a very specific program.
Okay, thank you for that. Go ahead, Ashlesha.
Sorry, I was just taking over from Susannah. On the current state, we are actually on weekend lockdown right now, and a general weekly lockdown, which means that most of the shops are shut. Only the essential stores are open. The weekend full lockdown means that only medical stores were open over the weekend, and any essential stores were only open for a couple of hours. So they're trying to make sure that people are moving around a lot. There might be a full lockdown that the government is considering, the state government, because of the number of cases in Maharashtra. I think India is quite high on numbers as of now, and Maharashtra is sort of almost leading the way. And Pune and Bombay are the two big cities within Maharashtra that have extremely high numbers. So we did expect things to change in 1 year's time, but it feels like we moved back to last April with full lockdowns and more restrictions. So our focus this year is primarily going to be on working on the roadmap that I talked about, deciding how we want to move forward. There's a lot of government compliance, new government compliance that is required, that is going to take up priority as well. And our focus is going to be on upgrading capacity within the Deep Griha team on using technology and making the current programs, the ones that we have running right now, making them stronger. So we are not looking at moving into anything new at this time, and we hope to have something new to announce in the next year.
We have a question from Ken for you, Ashlesha. Is there an application process for children staying at City of Child or learning at the Academy? There is.
So a child, like I said, the sponsorship program criteria is a child from a single parent home, or a child who has been orphaned. That is not a strict criteria. If we recognize that the family is in extreme need and the child needs the support that City of Child can provide, we take them in. But there's definitely an application. There's a home visit, so that if we have to follow up, because the child's going to be living with us and they go home for holidays. So if we have to follow up, we need to make sure that we have a connection with the family as well. So that's the process. So you have an application form that you fill, and a field worker makes a home visit to sort of assess the situation, and then the child comes to the center. And there's parent-teacher meetings that are regular as well.
There's a question here from Elizabeth about what are the plans for the trip to Deep Griha in Pune? Boy, Elizabeth, they are on hold. We will create another trip out of the US for those interested in joining us to go back to Pune. We had planned actually to be there hopefully now, but a year ago we were thinking about those plans. That ended. We will return, and so in Deep Griha we'll open up programs and things will change, but we'll see what happens in the months and the year ahead. So watch our newsletter, Elizabeth. I think you're on our list there, and we will state when those plans are coming again and what the dates will be. I want to catch up with others. Okay. Right now from Kitty, what are the biggest challenges and what is the greatest area of need right now?
The biggest challenge is, I mean, like we're in lockdown again. So some of the things that I talked about before was ensuring access, remote access is something that we have to look at. There are a few points that come up with need, which include things like security. Like for example, everyone's working from home. So our centers basically don't have staff visiting every day. So security is an issue. We want to ensure that the staff that comes to the offices has access to digital internet access to be able to reach out to the community like we intend to. I think sponsorship program is something that's going to grow bigger in this year because we know that a lot of families have lost access to income and there'll be a lot of children struggling to access education going forward. So that's a program that we want to focus on to make sure that we widen the reach of the sponsorship program. Like I said, we don't want, yeah.
Well, we have an addendum to that question. How much money is the digital access goal? In other words, what do you think you need to achieve the digital access?
I think at all our centers, it would be something around $6,000.
Okay. All right. It kind of fills in the blanks there for that. Right now, we have covered, I think, most of the questions that have turned in. I will take a moment in case there are any others that people want to send. I will cover some closing remarks and some information for all of you. Above all, just thank you so much for joining us today and being a part of this. And we in the US, of course, do programming and support whatever we can year round. But we had celebrated for years annually, usually in the early spring or late winter, with a banquet and a gathering here in Columbus, Ohio. And needless to say, last year's banquet got squashed literally when the state closed down about 3 days before our event. And our main speaker also canceled out, not that he didn't want to do it because of the changing dynamic in the corporate world for the spread of the disease. So we had to find a new way to meet and to share and to hopefully inspire people when we couldn't have a dinner. And my extreme apologies about whoever called me at this point. I can't say enough about everybody that's worked so hard to put this online. And we will probably continue, even after the pandemic is over, to do online events. Hopefully we'll get our banquet and celebration dinners back. When we do finish here, all of you that attended today will get a follow-up email. It will include links to all the things we've talked about. It will include links to our website, donation areas, and things like that. So if there are no further questions, let me see. Yeah, I see some comments here on a personal note. Thank you. I will close up with this. This is an old story, and it was told to me, shared to me by my former boss here when I was working with a church here in Columbus. And he told this story, an old one, about a man walking by the sea, and the tide was going out, and there were hundreds of starfish scattered over the beach. And he saw a young boy picking up a starfish occasionally and gently tossing it back into the waves as they receded. And then he would walk a little further and toss the next one in. And finally, he said to him, "What are you doing? There are hundreds of starfish. You can't make any difference." And the boy turned to him and he said, "It made a difference to that one." And that's the point. every time we support a child, every time we do something, whatever we can give, whatever we can volunteer for, it makes a difference to that one. And that's what came home to me years ago when we did our first documentary. It makes a huge difference. And you change lives, and all of you change lives that participate in it. So without further ado, I would just say thank you to everyone for participating today. Watch out on your email for the links and anything else that you may need. And of course, those links will also include contact information if you have further questions. So long for now, and thank everyone.
And thank you very much, Randy, as well.
Certainly.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susannah.
Thanks, Ashlesha.
Bye now.